am here to tell you a little story. Many have asked how Graham and I came to be together for 63 years, 8 months, and 26 days. Well, it was in the summer of 1950. My dad, being a pastor, was called to the People's Tabernacle. And as we went to the church, and I sat in the second or third pew with my mother, who would play for me to provide special music. And I was going to sing one of my favorite songs, which was The Love of God. And as we meditated and prepared ourselves for the service, I watched this beautiful young lady walk past us and take her place at the piano. I had remarked to my mother, "That's a beautiful lime green suit the young lady has got on. She has shoes to match, frilly blouse, and was exceptionally attractive." And as my mother leaned over and whispered to me, "She's also a very good pianist." And we both agreed. Things proceeded, but it became my turn to sing, and I was going to sing The Love of God, which was one of my favorite songs. So as we approached the piano, Darlene had to give up the piano to my mother, and she did so graciously. And I proceeded saying my song and proceeded back to where I was sitting, and as I walked past her, she looked up and said, "Very nice." Well, of course, that made me feel good, also kind of put my heart in a flutter that she would even acknowledge me. The ministry at the church went on. They had a large youth group. In fact, there was 2 different groups, and I had been ushered into the Curry's group that particular Sunday night, and Darlene was ushered into a different group. After the youth groups were out, I came to her brother, who was standing in the hallway, and I said to him, "I'd kind of like to be introduced to your sister." And he kind of sighed and acted as though he was going to proceed to get her, and turned to me and said, "Well, she is engaged." And much to my surprise, I kind of gasped, and yes, he said, "She already has her ring, but if she comes this way, I'll introduce the 2 of you." Well, as it went on here, they came together, and he says to Darlene, "Don would like to be introduced to you. So this is Don, this is Darlene." We had a short conversation, which was kind of awkward, but I thought, well, at least I had the opportunity of meeting her. Well, that was the beginning of what would become a long courtship, but we had to overcome the fact of the ring. I was very uncomfortable that I would be dating, or even think of dating, someone that was wearing somebody else's ring. On a particular Sunday night, went out to a drive-in there in Muskegon, which was a popular place for the young people when they got out of church, called Hanson's Drive-In. And that particular night, we wanted to sit outside, as they had tables outside, so we pulled tables together and began to seat ourselves around the table. And I had dated Sharon Brown a couple of times, and so Darlene said to Sharon as we approached the table, I think it's my turn to sit by Don. And Sharon kind of looked kind of awkwardly at us, and she kind of moved on. Well, anyway, she went and she sat by Wendell Wickland. And as we kind of conversed around the table, why, it was a quiet moment, and I kind of leaned over to her and I said, I see you're wearing a ring, so I take it that you said yes to someone. And she says, well, the whole thing is that my friend is overseas, and he's in the service, and when he came home on furlough, he wanted me to have this ring, but my folks made it to understand that this was really not an engagement ring. This was a commitment ring, as I was then too young to make such a commitment. So we asked her if she'd like to go to the game between Muskegon and Muskegon Heights, as they were always at each other, and kind of the rivalry of Muskegon and Muskegon Heights. And yeah, oddly enough, she said yes, she'd like to go. Well, I really didn't have her dad's permission and to ask her to a game, and she was still wearing this ring. So I thought, I'm going to stop by her dad's shop and to see what he says, because I'm really concerned about this engagement ring. So I did. And I went in the shop, we had our hellos and so forth, and I said to him, I would like to ask your daughter, Darlene, to the football game, and I know that she's engaged. And he kind of looked at me, and kind of a half smile on his face, and I said, but I would like to ask you first if you thought it would be okay that I would ask her to go to the football game. Well, I'd already asked her. So what in the world was I going to say do if he said no? But he didn't. He said, well, I can't see any problem in it. But just one thing I'm going to ask of you is that I want my daughter home at by 11 o'clock at night in the house. I said, well, that would not be a problem. After church on Sunday night, and this one particular Sunday night, I see she did not have her engagement ring on. And so when I left that night with the group, and we usually had 2 cars, and so anyway, Jim and Nancy and was taking Darlene and myself home, so we naturally went to Darlene's house first. And as I walked her to the door, I said, I see you're not wearing your engagement ring. And she said, no, not that, I laid it on the dresser. I'm trying to really make up my mind whether I'm going to send it back. Well, he'd been sending her beautiful things to put in her hope chest, so this would be something I was not going to encourage, but I was hoping she would do so. Well, it happened, and we dated then for, I don't know, a year and a half, and I came by their house about 7:30 one evening, and not realizing that her dad was home. He wasn't at the shop. I figured the family would be home. They normally were. So anyway, I knocked on the door. Dad invited me in. He'd been at the kitchen table reading the newspaper. And I said, gee, where is everybody? And he said, oh, they're all shopping, but they'll be home soon. Have a seat. And so I did. And as I sat there for a few minutes, I was getting up my nerve to ask him for Darlene's hand in marriage. And so I said to him, I said, well, there's something I'd like to talk to you about if you got a moment. He laid his newspaper down immediately and said, what's on your mind? So I told him, I said, Darlene and I have talked about getting married, and I would like to ask you first if for her hand in marriage. And he kind of sat back in his chair a little bit, and he said, well, there's a few things, I guess, that we should go over first. And I said, okay. I said, her dad asked me, well, tell me a little bit about your bills. That's something to talk about before you think about getting married. Where do you sit with your bills? And I said, well, I really don't have any bills. I don't buy anything unless I can pay for it. I said, how about it if I gave her a birthstone for a pre-engagement ring at Christmas time? And he said, well, I can't see any harm in that. That would be all right. And I said, then I would like to give her a diamond for Valentine's Day. And he said, well, when is this wedding going to be planned for? And I said, well, we talked about June 26th of 1953. However, when Dad had talked to her mother about it, Mother said, well, that was fine, but she would like to plan an engagement dinner for Valentine's Day. And so she had discussed that with Darlene first, and Darlene discussed it with me. What was fine with me didn't really make any difference. Well, they were going to have a photographer present because her mom wanted a picture of the whole family together. That was the family photo that was taken just prior to our engagement dinner, which was very nice, was very thoughtful of them to do that. So as we proceeded on to June 26th, both families had planned a beautiful wedding. We were married then for about 2 years, and our first little one come along, which was then our Don Jr., and following that there were 5 other siblings, which was a handful over the period of time, which ranged in about 10 years for a young mother. But her goal was that she wanted each one of her children, as they reached a certain age, to know the Lord as their personal Savior. So she began to talk to them at a very early age, and as I look back, I would say that all of the children knew the Lord as their personal Savior by between the ages of at least 5 and 9 years old. I've been very proud of their mom, and she sincerely was my confidant and friend, my love. She was my wife for these 63 years, 8 months, and 26 days. So I've told you the story of how we met and how our life has proceeded. There's been ups, there's been downs. There's been times that we've probably been cross with each other. and so forth, but we always tried never to go to bed with anything cross on our minds between us without either apologizing for what has been said. And so for that, I am very thankful that we met, were married, and have such a lovely family. And so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.